Well, I believe I was up there on the, the main table thing where you have the podium where Terry or whoever's speaking, including New Jack, had a speech, maybe prepared, maybe not prepared. I think he was just basically going off the cuff there. That's my assumption. I was there for that. I do remember that. I remember being nervous for my speech with Terry because I really wanted to do the most I could to honor Terry and speak about that. I don't even know if we knew he was retiring or not. I can't recall if that was something that took everybody off guard when he announced it. I think it took the fans off guard, of course, but I can't remember the roster knowing or not knowing and what the reaction was. But I do know one thing after that speech where he said he was retiring. I was like, we really have to make Terry look good at the pay-per-view. We really, really. And in that estimation, up to that point, everybody assumed Terry was going over. But I think there was still plan B, plan C to see if, like, Paulie to say explore other options with it. They were not like full sit down for hours, I'm sure, but you got to look at all three guys in the match. But of course, the most simple solution is, Dutch would say, give them what they want. This was one of those things, give them what they want. And it made that night, we didn't know how many retirements were coming after that, but that night and then the pay-per-view, it made it even more special that Terry won the world title that night. So, and we hope, Salmon and I believe, did the match justice, did Terry justice as well as the match. And of course, the Raven stuff, I didn't know how much time they were supposed to have. We can talk about that after, we watch it a couple more times. I don't know if it was planned to have that match go that short, but I believe everybody else had gone over their time. So they were severely cut in the world title. And it was for, in the end, it was for a good reason that it happened because the post-show Transformer explosion. So,
that's all going to be for next week. Future episode, but we can tell you what future episode it is next week. We'll be talking about that. I'm just looking at Terry Funk eventually lost the title to Sabu. Spoiler, he won it at Barely Legal. And then the week after, Sabu and Terry Funk do a triple threat match where Shane Douglas wins, which I hadn't realised how short a time that Sabu was ECW champion there. But anyway, the story for another day. Now,
I didn't even know he was ECW champion. That's
for 8
weird.
days. Yes. There you
wow.
go. The banquets, as well as Barely Legal itself, backstage, as well as in the arena as well, I believe, was being filmed not only by ECW's camera crew, but by a chap called Barry Blaustein. So he was filming, the banquet. That's how with Terry Funk standing at the table, I'm done, I'm retiring, etc. And then all the backstage stuff, including the Paul Heyman speech and everything else, which we'll get to soon as well. Beyond the Mat. You watched it. I'm presuming you've watched it several times. I mean, it was required viewing back in the day for fans like myself to, get a real true glimpse of what pro wrestling was all about back in the day. What were your opinions of... Let's talk about actual Barry and his crew hanging about these shows. Were you suspicious of them? Was everyone welcoming to them? Did they think, you get a big break from appearing on the big screen?
No, I had no idea about any of that. I just needed to get through that night. The banquet, first of all, and make sure I can put words together. I was very nervous. And then actually wrestling that match and doing the best that we all could do to honor Terry in that fashion with the world title win. I wasn't aware. There were so many foreign type things happening. You're talking about a satellite truck. You're talking about wires. We didn't have the exposure to a WWE, anywhere close to a WWE level production. And this wasn't that, but it was definitely further away from Ron and Charlie on cameras, a hard camera and a handheld, and let's just figure it out. And Paulie will do his editing magic afterwards, and we just have the show we're going to have. This was supposed to be running. We did the Raw in Manhattan Center. I'm trying to find that footage, by the way, still the backstage footage. We did things, and this is Raven once again, and Paul to a degree. We started trying to hit times, even on house shows, even at TV tapings or whatever. Raven had told me, and lots of people were telling people who didn't know, you need to work on hard time now. If you're going to go 8, you got to go 8. If you're going 12, you got to go 12. It's hard to nail that down, and it takes experience. So we had a little bit of preparation in hitting our times. I don't think everybody on the pay-per-view did. So getting back to that, looking around and seeing extra cameras, seeing cabling, seeing all this stuff, it was all a blur of foreign production. So Barry Blaustein, I wasn't even aware he was there filming for us, filming for Beyond the Mat, or filming for something completely different, a local news crew. We didn't know. So someone might have said, oh, he's filming a documentary, but man, I was so like, I got to get through this match, because I infamously said earlier in the day when we're sitting around talking a match, and then, by the way, we were getting there at 4 p.m., which was also pretty much earlier, especially if you travel to Raven, you're an hour late. So I'm sitting there, and I remember, Sam Ann's talking about spots and stuff, and Terry's talking, and he just looks at me, and I'm staying very quiet. And he's like, well, what are you thinking, Stevie? And I was like, well, what the hell am I doing here, man? I'm like, I was still in awe at the opportunity, and it didn't weigh on me any less that Tommy he wasn't even on the show outside of the commentary. There were so many people. Rob Van Dam, we're going to talk about that he started to become Rob Van Dam. That was the birth of what people know. You saw a little bit. He only did the thing like once or so, and I was like, wow, that was like, you saw that character born at the pay-per-view. So there's so many people that didn't reach their full potential, and I'm here kind of wondering how I got into this spot. So, that was my focus, not Beyond the Mat or anything like that. I do think one of my favorite scenes, and it shows the phoniness of Hollywood, in case people know, spoiler on that as well, when New Jack was auditioning for the casting agents, and then New Jack leaves, but the cameras are still there, so they still have to play up the BS Hollywood stuff. They're like, I don't see him as Denzel, but I see him as Denzel's friend. It always stuck with me. It's such a BS line that he had. So weird. I mean, I don't know if I could be, whose friend would I be? Would I be Christian Bale's friend? Could I be Robin? I don't know.
Yeah, you could do.
Who knows? I'm good enough being James's sidekick. I'm okay with that.
On the Stevie Richards show, how are you my sidekick on this?
Cross out the Stevie Richards, but James Romero.
I guess so.
There you go.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Beyond the Mat then, because it's so like the real life version of The Wrestler in the fact that a lot of the footage is just really concentrating on the most depressing aspects of what pro wrestling can be. And I know there's a lot of them, but, it's Jake Roberts, hunting around for crack pipes and looking like shit after, and he's like 42 and he looks like that. He looks better now in his 70s or whatever age, or late 60s, whatever age he is now. But, I mean, there's the big, fat, scummy promoter, the indie promoter, which I know that there's a lot of them.
Roland Alexander from APW. I know my buddy Donovan Morgan trained under him. Mike Modest, a bunch of guys. Great Khali was there for a little bit. Huh? Roland Alexander.
Is he a scummy promoter? He just looked like one.
Oh, God, man. Yeah. Oh, allegedly. So I love, my favorite scene in that is sitting there with the dad and the prospect, the potential student, sitting on the couch, and he's sitting there with his stomach literally over the desk going, do you read the nutrition labels on food? Mm-hmm. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then Tony Jones and Mike Modest, and he was going to get a piece of their contract and all that stuff, and they had a dark match in WWE and didn't quite make it. Tony Jones, rest in peace. There's just a lot of guys didn't. Yeah, he's gone. He died.
Yeah. I was going to bring the same up to you. I think he died last year.
Yeah. It's a shame.
Yeah, Mike Modest was someone.
He's a guy.
I'm sorry. I was going to say Mike Modest is someone who you just constantly hear the name of, but never really made it to any of the big promotions. He'd be like a low promotion in like Japan maybe, or whatever it was.
Well, he teamed with Donovan Morgan over there in Japan. They were a pretty formidable tag team and had success over in Japan. But that's a grind, and those are 2-3 week tours. The flights alone will make you want to drink. The flights alone are brutal. And, then the culture shock, even if you go over there a few times, culture shock, away from your family, away from your routine. And it's never, you can make money in Japan, but it's not the same type of success or notoriety or long-term memorable moments to fans that you're going to get in the States with an American promotion.
Do you think it was a bit disingenuous, the documentary as a whole, or do you think it was a fairly realistic portrayal of what wrestling was like in the late 90s at that point? When I say disingenuous, I mean just focusing too much on the negatives.
It just might have been what Barry was filming, because Barry caught the positives of ECW with the pay-per-view and people talking and everything. And
Mick Foley with the Royal Rumble. Yeah. I mean, that ended up being a negative in the end, yeah.
Yeah. I think he just was letting the cameras roll. I mean, I would dare say Wrestling with Shadows with Bret Hart had a little bit more of a, it was booked a little bit more than this. This was just, I just can't believe, I don't know, was Jake really that messed up that he let Barry film all that stuff? I don't know what, I mean, he wasn't in his right mind, I'm sure, but the amount of access that Barry and the crew had to Jake's personal life, the drug use, showing him in such a light, and then the stuff with the daughter. And I mean, that's a lot of stuff to put out there way back. And it's great. Jake's doing great. Like you said, he looks 70 then. He looks more like 42 now than he did then.
Yeah.
So, it's crazy. Then the draw stuff with Vince, and that turned into an unforeseeable tragedy after that. So there's a lot of stuff that, I don't know Barry personally, but I don't think he was out to expose the deep-seated underbelly. He seemed like a genuine wrestling fan, and that's in the opening was the little kid, the Barry Blaustein child, sitting there in front of the TV with the heroes and the villains. I don't think he meant to do that.
Is it just a fact that a lot of pro wrestling is depressing? In the back?
Yeah, at that time, maybe that was the first exposure to. You had your Secrets of Pro Wrestling exposed.
Oh, with Harley Race as the unnamed booker and Salem the Cat voicing it over. Stunned Granny. How's that for driving Miss Daisy?
Hey, I was stunned Granny when my back went out a few weeks ago, but I wasn't winking or getting up.
Sorry, pile driving.
Yeah, you
Miss
had
Daisy.
one of the pit bulls. Yeah, you had.
I messed up the
Look
line.
at this pencil neck key. Can you believe that people buy this crap? My favorite part is we need to reenact that with the fog machine, with the wrestling ring. The Corvette shows up, and even the girl has the mask on, all that stuff. Hey, one of the pit bulls was the guy with the bird cage on his head, by the way.
What? Was he?
That was one of the pit bulls.
Oh, right. I'm writing this down for Patreon.
We're going to watch along on that, Secrets of Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Look at him. He's taking his eye out. Or is he?
Do you know what else we should watch? We should watch the Jesse Ventura story from late 90s, and they have back in the day, and it's like a made-for-TV movie of 60 minutes and 90 minutes, and they're trying to reenact wrestling from the 70s, and it's starring Goldberg and ladders and stuff and ravens in it.
Oh, I got to see that. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, we need to. Wow. I need to hunt out the Jesse Ventura story from back in the day.
But you know what? Go to Barry real quick. Just my impression. I don't know the guy. Had very limited. I know I shook his hand and introduced myself. He came off very much like not a 1-to-1 ratio, but Bill Apter. Bill Apter has a very genuine love for the business, still almost childlike, which there's nothing wrong with that, and has fun with it. And Barry kind of gave me that impression, and he wasn't meaning, but he filmed what he had. What are you going to do? Cut it? You would cut out 75 to 80% of the movie if you left all that stuff out.
What were the boys' reaction to it? What were the other wrestlers' reaction to it?
I honestly couldn't tell you. Shane would probably be more of a person. You're not going to hear it since I stole his show. Sorry about that. But Shane or other people that had more experience. Like you got to think, guys like me, Meanie, Nova, lots of people. This was our first. I'm not talking about even we never had a live TV. This was our first pay-per-view, our first live initiation into the wrestling business. As far as this was like having my first match all over again. So I was laser focused. I wasn't hearing any, they might have been saying stuff. And, ECW was a very protected locker room too. So I'm sure Paul had to smarten Taz up, Perry, Bubba, Dreamer, everybody in there to kayfabe too, because kayfabe was still somewhat alive. I remember I was sitting with Meanie and Nova, but maybe we were sitting around baby faces and no heels. Then when we were watching the monitor, there was that part where I was out there and they had the monitor and they were doing things. And then they were like, they got to go home. They got to go home. And somebody said, oh, somebody told Stevie, and I told Terry and Sandman, we have to go home. That was the extent of maybe me being in the documentary. I don't know about anything else.
One more thing that is captured by the documentary that we want to talk about, because I'm sure you received 100 of these or more in your lifetime with ECW, is the Paul Heyman speeches. When did these start? Was this as soon as Paul took over ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, did he start doing these giant speeches before shows, or was this something for Barely Legal, or did they just ramp up over time?
I don't recall any speeches like this one. For all I know, this could be the one and only speech, but I believe when things happen, like previous to that, there might have been a speech about possibly losing a pay-per-view because of the mass transit thing, or there might have been something about we got taken off TV. There would definitely be something about we're on a new TV network, or we're in Florida or whatever. It wasn't like this. This was a Paulie motivational speech that will live throughout the history of wrestling. It still does. We're talking about it in 2025. One of the greatest promos you'll ever see or hear, ever. And I do believe it was from the heart. It has to be genuine. Paulie was trying to get us not to run through walls. Now these motivational speeches, by the way, when he was producing me or anybody else, he would give individual speeches like that. But as a group, they weren't as often as people, I guess, think they would be. But this one right here was I was trying to think of an analogy for the dance, because this is the dance. But this promo was the motivational speeches of motivational speeches. It didn't make us go out there and want to work any harder, want to kill ourselves any more, want to run through any extra walls for Paulie, but it centered and focused us on the fact that we had a hell of an opportunity and the world will be watching. And all the tests to see if we would succeed or fail as talents, promo-wise, match-wise, whatever was given to us, this was the dance. This was the final test to see if we could, on a live pay-per-view, deliver everything we delivered in the tape form and fashion. And I think everybody did.
Now let's get to the show itself. Barely Legal, buy rate 0.26, so that means around 40,000 buys, I believe. So above a 0.20 would have been deemed break even or a success. Pay-per-views were $20 or probably $19.95 at the time. The show generated a reported $400,000. The attendance, of course, was a sellout, 1,170. And a fun fact is that it nearly wasn't a sellout because front row at the time, and people will laugh, I mean, even with inflation, front row at ECW's first pay-per-view was $100 a ticket, which, just for an average Raw now, you're looking at $3,000. $40 per ticket getting price. The show drew $66,000 in ticket sales. I keep saying there's one more thing before we get to the show. There are quite a lot of people backstage. I don't know if you noticed some of the WCW guys. I believe there was a Nitro being taped the next night in the Core State Spectrum the next day, so that's why there was a lot of WCW guys. And also Dan the Beast 7 was backstage as well, reportedly. I don't know if he was trying to get a job or just hanging out, I guess. He would have been NWA champion at the time. Do you remember just any of these guys hanging about?
I do not. But obviously, him being NWA champion and hell, Extreme Championship Wrestling came to be. I can't believe that unless there was something going on there that we didn't know about, and Paulie and Dennis Carluzza were still talking. Yeah, I don't know, because that was the whole thing. Shane throwing the belt down and picking it up, throwing the NWA belt down and picking up the ECW one, and essentially putting the NWA in a spiral. I mean, it wasn't what it was anyway at that point, but that was almost like killing the company type of promo. And that was aired all the time, you know? So Dennis, who was trying to do stuff with the NWA, and it was mostly, I worked for Dennis on indies like, you know, after, in between ECW and WWF. And he drew really good houses, but the NWA was never what it was after Shane did the belt throw.